China's government has reportedly ordered its domestic airlines to stop accepting deliveries of Boeing jets and to halt purchases of aircraft parts Boeing 787. The price will go up by $40 million soon to make sure we get continuity of our supply chain. U.S. tariffs could put air safety at risk. Aerospace and airline industries warned tariffs could lift Boeing and Airbus plane prices even higher. Boeing, the crown jewel of American aerospace, just made a move that's sending shockwaves through every corner of Washington. And Wall Street, they're shutting down key assembly lines, not downsizing, not pausing, exiting. And they're not just leaving a factory behind, they're leaving the United States in a stunning announcement. Boeing confirmed it will shift major parts of its aircraft production overseas. The reason not just costs, but policy, Trump-era trade barriers once sold as a way to protect American workers are now choking the very companies they were meant to save. Raw materials are harder to source. Supply chains are tangled and global. Customers, they're walking away, especially after China, Canada and the EU struck back with retaliatory tariffs caught in this political crossfire. Boeing is looking elsewhere: Canada, Germany, Malaysia, places where the runway is clearer, the rules more stable and the future more certain. This isn't just about one company, it's a wake-up call. If even Boeing contractor to NASA and the Pentagon can't survive under US trade policy, who can? And here's the real question: is America trying to protect its industry actually driving it out? Let's break it down. The breaking point didn't come overnight. It was built tariff by tariff in April 2025. Trump slapped a 145% tariff on Chinese goods a few weeks later. Under business pressure, he dialed it back to a lighter rate on paper. The move targeted economic coercion and aimed to reshore American manufacturing. In practice, it pushed one of America's most iconic companies into crisis mode. Just days later, China hit back on April 15, 2025. Beijing ordered state-owned airlines to stop all new Boeing deliveries and suspend contracts tied to U.S. aerospace parts. That decision froze shipments to China, Southern China, Eastern and Air China, the country's three aviation giants. The exact number remains unclear, but analysts estimate that dozens of jets are now stuck in limbo as Boeing scrambles to resell them elsewhere. This isn't just about lost sales, it's market expulsion, and it hits even harder when you realize China was on track to become Boeing's biggest customer until everything stopped cold. But the damage didn't stop at loss. Boeing was already under intense pressure from rising material costs at home. By 2025, prices for key materials like aluminum and specialty steel had risen as much as 40%, driven in part by tariffs first introduced under Trump in 2018, and later doubled to 50% for some imports, high-grade titanium avionics components. And even wiring systems sourced from Europe and Asia were hit by layers of duties, further straining margins, while rivals like Airbus continued operating under stable EU trade agreements. Boeing saw its per unit cost surge. The financial math became brutal. Boeing couldn't pass the extra cost on to customers without pricing itself out of deals, but absorbing the difference meant shrinking profits and cutting corners. Elsewhere, something the company couldn't afford amid its ongoing recovery from the 737 MAX crisis. By May 2025, internal pressure boiled over, production delays, mounted layoff warnings surfaced in Everett and North Charleston, and in early June, Boeing finally made it official. Domestic assembly lines would be suspended indefinitely. With trade tensions rising, Boeing has started moving investment to places like Canada and Malaysia, countries with steady rules and skilled workers. It's a safer bet than navigating U.S. policy swings. The result: roughly 40,000 U.S. jobs tied to Boeing's domestic operations are now in jeopardy. And this isn't just about engineers on the factory floor, it's truckers, suppliers, food vendors, and the entire ecosystem that thrives around Boeing's presence. Entire communities, especially in Washington state and South Carolina, face economic freefall. What began as a policy designed to punish China has instead ricocheted back. America's largest aerospace manufacturer is no longer making jets in America, and that's not a theoretical concern. It's a shift already in motion, driven by real numbers and real consequences. The question now is no longer whether tariffs protect U.S. industries. It's whether those industries can survive them. Boeing's decision to halt domestic production isn't just a reaction to rising tariffs. It's a symptom of a larger, more systemic breakdown, the deeper issue. America's aerospace crown jewel can no longer operate without a global supply chain. No matter how patriotic the slogan "Made in America" doesn't build a jetliner. Alone, let's start with titanium, one of the most critical raw materials in aerospace. For years, Boeing relied heavily on Russia's VMPO Avisma, the world's largest producer of aerospace-grade titanium. In fact, the partnership was so deep that the two companies ran a joint venture to secure stable supplies. But after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, that pipeline collapse, sanctions and political fallout forced Boeing to scramble for alternatives, most of which are more expensive and far less abundant, according to ARSO Consulting. This disruption has had a direct impact on aerospace production timelines and costs, and titanium is just the tip of the iceberg. Much of Boeing's avionics, its flight control computers, cockpit systems and electronics comes from European partners. Thales, France and Liège, Germany are key suppliers. These components aren't plug and play. They're custom-engineered, highly regulated, and take years to certify. Replacing them with US-made substitutes isn't a simple swap. It's a logistical nightmare that requires retraining, re-certification, and in many cases reinventing entire production systems. A big part of the 737 structure comes from outside the US. Boeing works with suppliers in India, China, and other countries for key parts like the vertical fin. It's not just about cost, it's how global aircraft building works today. So when Trump-era tariffs began piling up, first in 2018, then expanded in 2025 to include a sweeping 145% tariff on Chinese imports, it wasn't just China that got hit. Boeing was caught in the crossfire. Materials became more expensive, parts were harder to find, and as global trade partners retaliated, Boeing's access to critical components dried up even further. By mid-2025, the situation reached a boiling point, with materials already up roughly 40% since 2021, and key buyers like China freezing orders. Boeing faced a triple threat: soaring costs, sagging sales, and cascading delays. At this point, the company had two options: either keep absorbing losses until the model broke, or move operations to friendlier terrain. Facing pressure from tariffs and international retaliation, Boeing has increasingly looked to expand operations in countries like Canada and Malaysia, nations with stable trade agreements and skilled labor. While there's no formal announcement of a production shift, analysts point to rising investment in global partnerships as a sign that Boeing is preparing for longer-term diversification. Germany, with its strong aerospace infrastructure, is also seen as a potential player in Boeing's evolving supply strategy. Let's be clear, this is not just about finding cheaper labor, it's about survival in a global system where parts come from 10 countries. Not one. America simply doesn't have the infrastructure or skilled labor base to domestically produce every component of a 737 or 787, at least not without years of investment and a fundamental policy reset. This is why Boeing's retreat from US soil is so symbolic. It marks the moment when industrial policy collided with industrial reality. It is a cautionary tale of what happens when protectionism meets complexity, because at the end of the day, Boeing didn't leave America, America left Boeing. The shockwave from Boeing's production halt is far bigger than one factory. It's hitting entire communities, and it's just getting started in late 2024. Boeing announced plans to shed roughly a tenth of its worldwide workforce as it grappled with restructuring and mounting global pressures. By January the 17th, 2025, over 1,160 workers had been laid off at its Everett, Washington site alone. North Charleston, South Carolina, home to a major Dreamliner plant, lost another 220 jobs in the same wave source. But this isn't just about Boeing employees. The layoffs are hitting everyone around them: truckers, janitors, caterers, engineers, and thousands of subcontractors who rely on Boeing's rhythm to stay alive. These ripple effects are hitting hard in places like St. Louis and Kansas City, where Boeing works with hundreds of parts suppliers. Smaller factories are now seeing cancelled orders and cutting staff. Many don't know if they'll still be running by the end of summer even. Boeing's support industries, maintenance firms, airport logistics providers, cafeteria services are feeling the squeeze. Many of these are single-client dependent businesses built around long-term Boeing contracts. When those vanish, they don't just lose revenue, they risk collapse. And then comes the intellectual toll. One of Boeing's most underappreciated contributions has been in research and development. For decades, the company partnered with top U.S. institutions from MIT and Georgia Tech to Purdue and the University of Washington, fueling aerospace innovation and workforce pipelines. But that landscape is starting to shift in March 2025. Boeing announced a new multi-million-dollar research collaboration with Queen's University Belfast in Northern Ireland, focusing on next-gen aerospace materials and sustainable aviation technology. It's a major vote of confidence in UK academia, but also a sign that the company is gradually moving its innovation ecosystem offshore. Why? Because in places like the UK, Germany and Canada, the rules don't change overnight. Trade policy is predictable, labour is skilled, and public-private investment programs are designed to keep high-tech companies rooted in contrast. Boeing's US strategy is under siege, from tariff uncertainty to export permit delays, and the political turbulence that comes with it. China and the EU aren't just buyers anymore, they're Boeing's rivals. After China froze new aircraft orders in April 2025, Boeing got hit hard by tariffs and lost deals. Meanwhile, Airbus is gaining ground fast, backed by steady trade deals across the EU. This is how industries hollow out, not in one big crash, but in hundreds of smaller cuts. First the layoffs, then the cancelled contracts, then the brain drains. Boeing's production halt is no longer a temporary pause. It's a canary in the coal mine. If America's flagship aerospace brand can't keep building planes at home, despite its size, history, and government ties, then what hope do smaller manufacturers have? The loss of 40,000 potential jobs is not just a labour statistic, it's a national alarm bell, and ignoring it may cost more than just paychecks. It may cost America its seat at the head of global industry. Made in America isn't a slogan if its flagship plane maker can't build planes at home. Boeing's pullback is more than a business shift. It's a gut punch to the country's industrial identity, and the numbers prove it. The pain started abroad on the 15th April 2025. Beijing ordered its state carriers to halt all new Boeing deliveries after Washington imposed triple-digit tariffs on Chinese goods. Overnight deliveries to China, once touted as Boeing's next billion-dollar growth engine, were frozen less than 2 months later. Bloomberg reported that Chinese airlines were weighing an order for up to 500 Airbus aircraft, a deal that would lock in Europe's rival as Beijing's go-to supplier for the next decade. China and the EU aren't just customers anymore, they're stepping into Boeing's market space. The shock then ricocheted back home on November the 10th, 2024. Boeing told investors it would cut 17,000 jobs, about 10% of its global workforce, to staunch mounting losses. Those cuts landed hardest at its Everett complex outside Seattle, where more than 1,000 workers were let go this winter, and at plants in North Charleston and St. Louis, now bracing for a second wave. Communities built around the Dreamliner line are watching paychecks vanish and property values slip. Suppliers aren't faring any better. Cancelled purchase orders for wing spars and landing gear castings are forcing smaller machine shops to lay off shifts or shutter. Entirely, talent is leaving, with the jobs Boeing's old ties to MIT and Purdue now play second fiddle to fresh labs in Belfast and Montreal, where funding moves quicker and trade rules stay steady. The message to American engineers is unmistakable. The future of high-tech aerospace innovation may unfold on someone else's soil. All this was triggered by a policy advertised as protection, yet tariffs meant to shield U.S. manufacturing have hiked raw material costs and provoked blow-for-blow retaliation. When the dust settles, Boeing will still build jets, just not under a U.S. zip code, if a century-old icon can't navigate today's rulebook. What chance do smaller manufacturers have? That's why this exodus stings more than a quarterly loss. Boeing's retreat signals that America's industrial brand equity is slipping, one job cut and one lost export contract. At a time, the real question now isn't whether tariffs can protect domestic industry, it's whether domestic industry can survive the protection. Survival means finding new runways with U.S. trade policy, lurching from one tariff fight to the next. Boeing is spreading its wings to places where the rules stay put and the welcome mats are rolled out with cash incentives. Canada moved to the front of the line on May 28, 2025, when Boeing pledged 17.5 million Canadian, about $12.88 million US, to jumpstart two sustainable aviation fuel projects in British Columbia and Quebec. Ottawa's pitch was simple, stable trade, generous R&D credits, and a guaranteed military contract for the P-8A Poseidon. Boeing called the deal an ITB commitment, but insiders see it as beachhead financing for a wider production shift north of the border. Germany's next. Mid-May 2024, Boeing beefed up a parts hub in North Rhine-Westphalia, its third there, faster parts for EU clients. Zero tariff surprises. Berlin sweetened the move with export financing, guarantees and access to one of Europe's deepest pools of aerospace engineers for Boeing. The math is easy: quicker parts flow to EU customers, and no risk of snap tariffs from Washington. Southeast Asia offers another safety valve. Kuwait. Kuala Lumpur locked in an order for 3 737 MAX jets on 21st of March 2025, Malaysia Airlines' biggest single Boeing purchase in a decade. The deal came packaged with tax holidays inside a government-run aerospace park, plus a promise to accelerate approvals for a Boeing maintenance center near Selangor. Low labor costs. Seal the bargain. Skilled technicians there earn a third of what counterparts make in South Carolina. India rounds out the strategy long before the current tariff war. Boeing teamed with Tata in Hyderabad to machine vertical fins for the 737. The plant shipped its first unit on the 14th. February 2023 and is ramping toward 10 ship sets a month capacity. Boeing once planned for which a Hyderabad's draw is familiar: no tariff drama, cheap power and a state government that builds highways to the factory gate. Critics will call this running away, yet the board sees it as risk insurance. Each new site hedges against a single country shock. If one market closes, say Beijing freezes orders, another region can pick up the slack, and every foreign investment buys political capital abroad, the kind that earns big carriers like Lufthansa or Air Canada a reason to stick with Boeing instead of defecting to Airbus. In short, Boeing isn't abandoning the stars and stripes, it's layering its bets in a world where patriotic slogans don't pay logistics bills and where predictable policy beats home field pride every time. So do tariffs really shield American industry, or do they push it out the door? Boeing's numbers suggest the latter. On November 11, 2024, Boeing warned it would shed a sizable slice of its workforce to reset to financial reality. Pink slips soon landed in Everett North. Charleston and St. Louis well before any tariff saved a single job. Protectionism also lit a fire under Boeing's competitors after Beijing blocked U.S. jets. Chinese airlines wasted no time shifting their focus to Airbus, signaling a major pivot in their fleet strategy. Every aircraft that deal secures is one less built in the United States, and one more reason for Airbus to expand its own supply base, unable to predict U.S. policy swings. Boeing is hedging elsewhere in late May 2025. The company poured millions into Canadian sustainable fuel initiatives. Ottawa offered clean tech credits and stable trade terms. Benefits Boeing can't count on at home. China shutters. A major sales channel Airbus moves in 17,000. American paychecks vanish and the company everybody thought was synonymous with Made in America starts seating long-term bets north of the border. None of that bolsters domestic industry. All of it erodes. Boeing may be the first marquee name forced to choose between patriotism and survival, but it won't be the last when the cost of staying outweighs the cost of leaving. Even the stars on a corporate logo can't keep production at home. That's the unintended consequence of modern protectionism. It promises jobs yet delivers exits, and every exit weakens the high-tech ecosystem. The tariffs were supposed to save America's biggest retailers. Just took a body blow, and it came from Washington, not Beijing. Tariffs meant to shield the economy, have slashed profit margins, emptied clearance aisles, and even forced household names to shutter stores they once called flagship. Tonight, Walmart signals price hikes to cover new import taxes. Target warns shoppers of tariff-driven sticker shock, and Home Depot admits some items could disappear from its shelves if duties stick. The red, white and blue price tag is getting harder to afford. Here's what we've learned. First, when tariffs rise, costs jump. Consumers feel it within weeks. Second, supply chains don't wait for Congress. They reroute themselves to friendlier ports. Third, every retail layoff echoes all the way to Main Street. Logistics firms, packaging plants and family-run farms all lose orders they counted on. So where does this end? Maybe lawmakers strike a deal and dial back the duties. Maybe corporate America doubles down on nearshoring and leaves U.S. docks quieter than ever. One thing is certain. If the tariff chess match continues, the next retail giant to scale back won't be a surprise. It'll be the new normal. Is this self-inflicted pain worth the promise of economic independence, or is it a slow bleed the country can't afford? Ask Boeing. Its assembly lines have already answered, and they're no longer on U.S. soil. Drop your take in the